Welcome to our RDF Church podcast. This is our Midweek Connection where we go deeper into the sermon that we heard this past Sunday. We really hope that this podcast and this week's discussion encourages you as you grow deeper into your relationship with God and as you get to know our church family closer and closer. We really hope you enjoy. All right, well, welcome back, everybody, to our Midweek Connection podcast. Again, we have Pastor Dave.
Yep.
Thanks so much for making time out of this, out of your week. Yeah. I know, especially since Easter's coming up, and there's a lot of busy time. A lot of wheels moving.
Glad to do it. It's important for us. We love having this opportunity to connect and just re-engage with the message from the weekend and give people a chance to think about it and talk about it. That's really a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I know it's important for me, especially doing these interviews. It allows me to kind of be present in the pews every Sunday morning and attentive, which knowing we're going to have this conversation. That's awesome. Which whoever is listening or watching, I might ask you to be where I'm sitting, you know? Yeah. So maybe pay a little more attention during the sermon so they can come in and do this.
Hey, if we can do it, anybody can do it.
I would agree. I think it's a really fun thing to do. And it's a good incentive for me to pay attention to. But anyway, especially for this week, as I was processing your sermon, I think it's a really important, every sermon's important, but specifically in today's day and age, and how us as believers in Jesus, how we process kind of three categories that we find ourselves in, whether we're, in relationship, whether we're man or woman, or it's wives and husbands. Children and parents, and then slaves and masters, or in our context, employees and employers. And I think there's a big misunderstanding, especially, at least for me, from the previous churches that I was at, in a lot of in all of those three, in those three categories, but it was kind of processed as like one ruling over the other.
Oh yeah.
But from what I got from hearing you speak, it's very mutual. It's a mutual submission.
I think that's the surprising thing in his day about what Paul said, that he did have these balanced pairs of relationships, that wives and husbands are responsible to give to one another, children and parents. To have children on a list like that would have been a big deal to people in their day. Like, children were to be seen and not heard, that sort of thing. And then the thought that those who were what we'd call them bosses, but who were actually slave owners in that day, that they had a responsibility to people to be just and to be fair. That was breaking new ground, and it's because that's what the gospel does, right? The gospel changes the way we think about our relationships with others, and I think that's Paul's big point. Yeah,
and I think too it's important. From what I've been reading as of late, I read an interesting quote, kind of going into the children and parents kind of paradigm. I read an interesting quote that arguably the church was started from the first quote unquote youth group, being Jesus, being the 12 disciples, pastor.
And they have like all-nighters, play broom ball and stuff. Is that what you're saying?
No, not quite. But it's interesting, kind of pulling from that idea of, children having kind of a quote unquote like seat at the table, and that have a responsibility and have a call to be in that submission and be in that mutual submission between,
Which for children and parents, that's defined as, the children obeying their parents.
Right.
Yeah, which in our culture, that's it's a given
Mm-hmm.
that, especially when you're a teenager, that you don't obey your parents all the time.
Right.
And so the call of Jesus is to say, no. This is how I would live with people. If you want to show Jesus, if you want to show me to others,
Yeah.
this is how you live. And
Right.
so there's a pretty cool opportunity there if you're a young person, but
Right.
also a big challenge.
Right, because the parents are supposed to
Yeah.
push and shape.
Yeah,
That's the
of
responsibility,
course.
right?
Yeah, of course. There's an authority construct in
Mhm.
that, but
Mhm.
but then they're called upon not to embitter, not to discourage, not to provoke
Right.
their children by being either heavy-handed or negligent or a whole host of other things. Yeah, it's a pair. They both have to do things.
Exactly.
Yeah. So same with the other relationships, wives and husbands,
Right.
same thing. And then as we say, employees and employers, that there's a mutual responsibility one to the other.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a big concept.
It is a big concept, I think especially as we go on from here and as more and more we see the church kind of get being pushed into the next how do you call it, the next, not phase, but the next time period of how culture
Sort of
develops and moves along.
Yeah.
And that timeless truth that Paul is talking about, it still holds even further and past that.
It's super relevant,
right?
And it's a great opportunity for people who are Christians to then communicate Christ to others. You think about it. You live in a relationship where, let's say, as a husband and wife, where you're mutually giving one to another. People are going to notice that. They're going to go, "Oh, I thought Jesus made people more judgmental. I thought religion made people more harsh." And when they see, no, it actually makes them more sacrificial, more willing to give of themselves to others, whether they're the husband or the wife.
Yeah.
Same with family relationships. Same with boss and employee relationships. I mean, that'll get people's attention.
Right.
And that's what Jesus is trying to do. He's trying to say, this is how I would live. The way I would live is different. It's better.
Yeah. I think that's big, honestly, because it I think outside of the church, people have that scope that Jesus, like you were saying, they're believers. The people that believe in Jesus are very judgmental.
We can be, yeah.
They're the ones that rule over the men rule over their wives.
Yeah. In some situations, that's the case.
Yeah. And it's important to really kind of stop and hear and heed what God is saying through the words of Paul.
Yeah. And the big picture always being like, this is the way of Jesus. As we study and follow the life of Jesus, and especially we're heading into Easter, as you mentioned earlier, and to be really focused on the idea that the way Jesus chose to live his life was to give his life,
right?
To be sacrificial. And that should influence all of our relationships. So whatever the actual relationship situation you're in, right? There's this opportunity to say, okay, how would Jesus do this?
Yeah. That's just a thought just popped in my mind, as Jesus being the son or the child of God the Father, how he oriented himself to God the Father.
Yeah,
right.
He obeyed.
Yeah. And that mutual thing from the Father to Jesus, he did not provoke.
No. He loved unconditionally. He helped. He supported. He was there.
Yeah. That's crazy. I think it's important to see that even in our deepest moments, when people that we're in relationship with, that Jesus knows exactly what you're feeling, or Jesus knows what you're going to, and what the mind, how your mind is processing, whatever challenge you're going through.
Yeah, that's what the book of Hebrews says, right? Yeah. We don't have a high priest who can't sympathize with us.
Exactly.
He can. He's been there.
Right. Yeah. I think, as I listened to your sermon again on the previous episode when we posted this, there wasn't much for wasn't much for me to continue to pull out, except for what we've been talking about, is that Jesus sets these apart for us to operate in these relationships, because that's how he
that's how he lived.
That's how he lives.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't want to be long-winded and continue to beat this over the head, this point over the head. So I think that's a good place for us to stop and to let that sink in.
All right.
Right?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, that sounds good. It's
Yeah.
been good talking to you.
It is. It's been great talking to you too. Is there anything also that you want to encourage us as we, or you want us to dwell on as we enter into the Easter weekend? It's coming right up. It's right around the corner. So is there anything?
It's the life of Jesus, right? It's the full implication of the lengths that Jesus was willing to go to take on the penalty for my sin, the thing that separated me from God, the thing that keeps me from that relationship. He was willing to go to the lengths of the cross to remove that for us. And that is a humility that that stirs me, and it should stir all of us to worship. Yeah.
Dave, thank you so much for your time, and thank you that you are willing to lead us intentionally into
my privilege.
the presence of God.
My privilege. Yeah. Thanks for having the conversation, and thanks to you all for engaging.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you next week.